Temple 51, Ishiteji, Stone Hand Temple. This temple is located right in Matsuyama City, the largest city in Shikoku and the sister city to Sacramento, my hometown. The path from the main gate is lined with a number of shops that you can buy little knickknacks at. And they also sell grilled mochi, which once upon a time was given out free to pilgrims. This is one very unusual temple. It's very large and sprawling, and it plays a very significant part in the history of the pilgrimage itself, and I'll get to that in a minute. But its layout is really eclectic. It has bits of Buddhism and spirituality from all over the world just kind of thrown together. There's a loudspeaker with chanting constantly going on, and there are buildings from different types of Buddhist buildings from all over the world that are part of this temple. So you can spend a lot of time wandering about here if you so wish and trying to make sense of it. In my opinion, it's a little too Disney-esque and carnival-esque. Legend states that a rich and stingy man named Emon Saburo lived in Ebara village. And one day, a pilgrim came by to his door begging for alms, and Saburo refused to give him any and pushed him away. The next day, the pilgrim came back, and Saburo again pushed him away, this time a little bit more forcefully. This continued in the same manner until the 8th day, when Saburo completely lost his temper and with a broom hit the monk's begging bowl, and it fell to the ground and smashed into 8 pieces. The henro, the pilgrim, said nothing and walked away. The next day, one of Saburo's 8 sons died for an unknown reason, and each day thereafter, sons died until the 8th day he had lost all 8 of his sons. And be sure to watch video Bangai number 9, which is Emon Saburo's house, and you can also visit Emon Saburo's sons' graves. Emon was extremely heartbroken at the death of all of his sons, and he began walking around Shikoku looking for the pilgrim whose bowl he had broken. And he walked it 20 times, but never met him. And then he decided to walk it in reverse direction. And on this, his 21st pilgrimage around, going in reverse direction, he met Kobodaishi near Temple 12. And he was dying and begged forgiveness. And he repented for all of his wrongdoings. Kobodaishi told him that his hard work on the Ahenro Trail and his repentance had washed away his sins, and asked if he had any last wishes. Emon Saburo told him that he hoped he would be reborn as the Lord of Iyo Province, so that he would have the power to do good. He swore that in his next life he would atone for all the wrongdoings he had done in his life. Kobodaishi picked up a small stone, wrote something on it, and placed it in Saburo's hand, at which time Emon Saburo passed away. Kobodaishi buried his body beside the trail and marked his grave by planting Saburo's staff in the ground. And the staff became a cedar tree, and the spot is called Joshin-an, Cedar Staff Hut. Later, in the early 17th century, the wife of the daimyo of Uzuki Castle gave birth to a son, but the child was never able to open his left hand, even after 3 years. At last, the chief priest was called, and he succeeded in opening his hand through prayer. When the hand was opened, they found a stone on which was written, "Incarnation of Emon Saburo." The boy grew up to inherit his father's rich estate, and he dedicated his life to performing good deeds with his money. As mentioned before, many legends state that Emon had specifically asked Daishi to ensure that he be reborn a rich man. He donated the stone he had been born with and renamed this temple Ishiteji, or Stone Hand Temple. The stone that he was holding when he was born is stored here, and if you go and look at it, it's actually a little bit large for a baby to really hold. This story is the beginning of the Shikoku pilgrimage, and it's important to note that the pilgrimage began with a lay person walking it, not a priest or anyone else. The temple was founded by Gyogi on the orders of Emperor Shomu. The Honzon was also carved by Gyogi. It was later rebuilt by Ryokucho Ochi, the ruler of Iyo province in the 8th century. This temple once contained 64 different buildings, and most were destroyed by Chosakabe, and they have later been rebuilt. The temple gate is of the 13th or 14th century, as is the bell. In front of Ishiteji is a roped-off stone bridge that the Daishi himself crossed, so it's too holy for anyone else to set foot on and cross themselves. Ishiteji specializes in fertilities, and couples having trouble conceiving come here to pray for a new arrival. They choose a stone from a pile all around that doesn't have anything written on it, and they pray for conception, and then they take it home, and after a successful birth, they return the stone with the name of the baby and the date of the birth on it. And this return stones, most of these stones here are return stones with names of babies that have been born thanks to the beneficence of the deities of this temple. So if you're trying to conceive and are having trouble, or just thinking of having a baby, come here, pick up a stone, bring it home, and after your baby is born, come back here and leave it behind. This temple is located on the eastern side of Matsuyama City, and it is right near Dogo Hot Springs. This is a hot springs well worth seeing, and if you can stay, it probably makes sense to stay near the Dogo Hot Springs. The Dogo Hot Springs are one of the oldest hot springs in Japan, and they're made famous by Japan's first great author Natsume Soseki in the early 20th century in his novel Bochan, a novel well worth reading. Temple 51. Ishiteji, Stone Hand Temple. Give yourself plenty of time if you want to explore all the nooks and crannies of this very eccentric temple. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.